I have a sample protocol here that uses a very simple translation to demonstrate how this can work. So I'm going to open my translation protocol, and translations are always located in the protocol settings. They have their own tab. As you can see, we have two translations defined for this particular protocol. I'm going to go ahead and open the first one so we can take a look at the available options. We have three settings here. I'm going to open the mode. As you see, the mode defines whether this translation is for received data, sent data, or both. So this allows you to control which direction OmniServer is going to translate data for, whether it's data that OmniServer is sending to a device or data we're receiving from the device, or both. The computer field is where you're going to define data as it should be seen by OmniServer. So if this happened to be a send translation, then the computer value here would be the pre-translation data, as in the data before we're going to apply the translation to it and send it to the device. If this was a received translation, then the computer value would be the post-translation data, would be the data that we receive from the device and what we want to translate and send to a client application. The remote field defines data as it should be seen by the remote device. So if this is a send translation, this would be the post-translation data after OmniServer has applied a translation and sent it to the device. If this was a received translation, this would be the pre-translated raw data that we're receiving from the device before we apply the translation and pass that to the client. Here you can see this translation is for translating received data only. That means we're expecting to receive a hexadecimal 0 from our device, and when we receive that hexadecimal 0, I want to pass a string value of off to my client application. Okay, back in our main menu here, we see two other settings at the bottom. We can tell OmniServer that for any messages using translations that have error detection codes, that the error detection code should be computed using the data as OmniServer sees it, so that any translations used would not actually affect the EDC calculation or its resulting value. This can be disabled if you're performing a translation that's required by a device, and that protocol specifies that the error detection code should take this translation into account when performing the calculation. The other setting here allows you to specify whether or not OmniServer should default to using these translations for all data fields and all messages. If you do not enable this, then you do have to specify whether or not to use translations for each sequence in a message. This is disabled for our translations now, so we have to specify when a sequence is going to use these translations. Okay, I'm going to go and close out of this. I'm going to open my host message. And since this was a receive-only translation, we're just going to go over and take a look at the response section. So you can see here we have a data item defined with string formatting. And we've got this T+ here, and I'm going to explain that to you. And we're terminated by a carriage return. We're going to double-click on this item to open up the sequence builder. See here, like I said, the string formatting. If we move on to the advanced formatting, then you're going to notice this translation field. And you're going to notice we have a radio button for translate here. And you see that translate setting corresponds to our T+ up here. It's going to be this by default, which means that it's not going to translate. You can also tell your sequences specifically not to translate, which is actually really useful if you set the previous setting so that it defaults to translating everything that we saw when we were defining our translation. At that point, you can let it default to translating everything, and then you can specify sequences that you don't want to translate. If you have a lot of sequences that need to be translated, that might actually be the best option. In this case, we're going to leave this at translate, which tells OmniServer for any bytes that it should parse into this item, it needs to apply those translations. So basically, if a value of 0 is received, the word off is going to be passed to the client for this data item. If the value of 1 is received, then the word on is going to be passed to the client application for this item. Any other values other than that will be parsed as is because the translations won't apply.